Coast's most accurate forecast from the First Coast News Weather Team, certified by Weather Rate, sponsored by AC Designs.
Yeah. Hi there, friends. I'm meteorologist Robert Speta, joined by our chief meteorologist, Lewis Turner, here on our Talking Tropics today. Lou, today's topic, of course, is our tropical depression out here. Not named yet, and I think it would be very too premature to even start calling it a name. It was last week we had 91 L out there.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, I bring it up because it's definitely a tale of caution, I suppose, with people trying to name these things before they actually form and develop. What are your thoughts on this guy out here right now? We're going to go through and just all the graphics and everything, but I want to hear your kind of first thoughts on it.
First thoughts, that's a big wave. It's a big area, big open area still, waiting for it to close off. You bring up good points about 91. It was one of those situations where people were already calling it the G name. People were getting a little ahead of themselves. The difference, this is pretty cool. I just to sidetrack a little bit, but every Tuesday, 4:30 p.m. Come to First Coast News Plus because we're doing this great stream. We've got Dr. Rick Knabb who joins us now every Tuesday at 4:30. He's the Weather Channel hurricane expert. He was the director of the National Hurricane Center for a period of time, I think almost a decade, several years at least. And I asked him, I was like, so from your Hurricane Center perspective, what happened with 91 that where we got up to high, that 90% chance of development, and then in 24 hours went to 30, and then after that, gone. Like, what happened there? And what's the difference with this? And he did say, so with the 91, if you're kind of an avid weather watcher and consumer of the headlines, you remember it was a tropical wave. It looked pretty good, approaching the Lesser Antilles, and then lost a lot of its juice, ran into a lot of dry air. But what he said was, so remember, we were doing a 7-day forecast of 90%, but that 48-hour forecast was still very low.
Yes.
And they never bumped that up very high. That 48-hour was always low. And he goes, the difference, in the forecasting side of things with 91 and 92, that's now a tropical depression number 7, is that they had 90. The confidence was so high, it was 90 in the 7-day and 90 in the 48-hour time period as well. So we had very high confidence. There is not as much dry air in place, meaning the atmosphere in the tropical basin right now a little less stable, got a little more instability happening here. So the environment's at least conducive for it maintaining itself. Now, strengthening rapidly, that's yet to be determined with this.
Yeah, and I think that's probably one of the big things. Maybe it might get its act together. We do have a tropical depression, could get that name. But as far as the peak intensity, and as we all know, the intensity forecast, definitely one of the harder things to forecast with these systems. But one thing I think that we are fairly confident on is that, and we'll get this out of the way right off the bat, is that it is likely going to turn towards the north and stay east of Florida, the First Coast, and the entire East Coast, right?
Yep.
And the reasoning behind this is the same thing that we saw with like Aaron, is that Bermuda High looks like it's going to shift a little bit towards the east. It allows for this gap in the subtropical ridge for this to turn and kind of head off there towards north. What we're looking at right here is the GFS model showing that sharp turn towards north. But what I want to note, though, is if we go back to even the satellite imagery, because this is always the first thing we like to do, right? When we're looking at these tropical systems, look at the satellite imagery, because if you just look at the models, you're never going to get a good clue. And one thing that I notice right now, this is having a little bit of shear interact with it.
Absolutely.
You can see that right there, right?
Yep, absolutely. When you see that kind of broadening there on the northern side, and with some of these, you see a flatter edge. That just indicates certainly there's some winds aloft pushing up against this. So as with any thunderstorm that's got to develop first with a tropical system or any thunder, you've got to have limited shear up top because these things have to stack up, and anything that's blowing it apart, hurricanes, tropical systems, very finicky. Okay, you got to have perfect conditions for those to finally pop off, and they just haven't been perfect in the Atlantic. Now, some interesting things to think about, and I know we'll get there as we do focus on this particular tropical depression. But fantastic graphic, yeah. I mean, tells a great story. You got to get these systems have to breathe. They have to you're getting kind of this interlocking of almost high pressure aloft with low pressure at the surface. It's just got to be perfect. I am interested in all the fronts that we've had. Even at the mid-latitudes in this part of the season. That takes my attention kind of less so, while of course we're watching this tropical depression very carefully, and that northern turn seems extremely likely. The wind shear from these troughs and these fronts that have been digging in that you're showing us has that, not force field's the wrong word, but it just has that steering mechanism to keep it away from the east coast of the United States. But you know what it doesn't do? It doesn't protect the east coast of the United States from things that would come from the Caribbean or the Gulf.
Yes.
It would steer them right up into the state of Florida.
So the further north these systems develop, so if we look at our track right here with this depression, the further north that this develops, the more than likely it will hit. And I think force field's a good way, because that's not what it is,
right.
But it generally, I think of like the banks of Daytona 500.
Sure.
Like you hit that, you're churning, right?
Yeah.
And that's what that kind of jet stream dipping down. But if it goes south of that, and let's say this doesn't look like that's going to happen. Let's say this stayed weak and headed out towards the Caribbean and kind of looped back around. Then it would get picked up and get pulled towards the north. I mean, that's what we've seen with Helene almost a year ago. Today was it started further towards the south and it lifted towards the north here. Yeah, that doesn't look like the case with this one.
Correct.
And I think that's kind of one of the big takeaways I want people to kind of remember with this storm, is that even if it did really strengthen or intensify, it's a little further towards the north, likely going to make that loop away. One thing we could get here, though, and especially for our friends in Bermuda, is some decent, and let's say this did intensify up to a hurricane status, some decent swells, some long waves. And just like with Aaron, I think, and this is over a week out, friends. I always have to put that caveat on there. This could change a little bit, but just given what we're seeing here today, I think those long period swells could be dangerous rip currents and stuff like that. That could probably be one of the bigger impactors coming from this storm system. But you know what also hit almost 8 years ago today, Lou? Well, 8 years ago, about 3-4 days ago.
We talking Irma?
Irma.
Okay.
Right?
Irma is a kind of one of those landmark. If you were here, if you've been in Jacksonville for more than 10 years, or you got here right around that Irma period of time, this is one of those between Matthew and Irma and Ian, Nicole. You write the novel of your hurricane life around some of these, and Irma's its own chapter. Irma's its own novel, but it's a formative moment, for the First Coast, and the reminder with Irma is it was a tropical storm as it made its way past Jacksonville and dumped more than 21, 22 and above inches of rain.
Before we go any further, let's jump in.
You want to tell us a little story?
No, we got a new name storm.
Oh, we do. Do we have
we have Gabrielle.
Just happened. Okay.
Which just happened.
News.
We were about to toss to a little package here on Irma. So why don't we do that real quick? You keep going. Let's do a recap of Irma real quick from 8 years ago. The impacts here on the First Coast. It's going to be about 2 minutes. Don't go anywhere, though, because we just got our new name storm. Let's break down the latest information.
Here's Irma.
2 minutes. 8 years ago here on September 10th, Hurricane Irma made landfall in the Sunshine State. Irma brought hurricane-force winds to South Florida, widespread tornadoes, and severe flooding, including here on the First Coast. But before Florida, Irma traveled more than 4,000 miles across the Atlantic, setting records along the way. The storm rapidly intensified off of Africa, jumping from a tropical storm to a Category 3 hurricane in just 30 hours. It then struck the Leeward Islands as a Category 5 strength storm, the strongest landfall there on record, and maintained that intensity for an incredible 37 straight hours. Irma later hit Cuba as the first Category 5 there since 1924 before curving north and into Florida. It came ashore in the Keys as a Cat 4, weakening to a tropical storm by the time it neared Jacksonville. But weakened is definitely a relative term. Ahead of Irma, a nor'easter had already pushed waters into our inlets and along the St. Johns River. The hurricane piled more on top of that, driving up to record levels of flooding along the river. Also, Irma brought 21 tornadoes to the state of Florida, including an EF2 that caused damage in St. Augustine. In all, Irma made 7 landfalls, caused 134 deaths, and left behind $70 billion in damages. And this includes a lot of damage, yes, here to the First Coast and into Jacksonville. I'm meteorologist Robert Speta, First Coast News, on your side. All right, and that's a look back at Hurricane Irma. That was 8 years ago, believe it or not. All right, let's talk about our latest named storm. When I say latest, I mean latest. This just came out 2 minutes ago. Here we have Tropical Storm Gabrielle. It has been officially named by the National Hurricane Center. Winds of 45 miles per hour, pressure at 1,006 millibars. Now, if we look at satellite imagery, it doesn't look really organized, to be quite frank with you. But I was just, while we were rolling that little package there, I was just looking at what we call ASCAT imagery. Basically, I wish I could pull up the graphic here, but I can tell you, basically satellite-derived winds. We have a polar orbiter satellite that goes around the Earth from north to south. So polar orbiter, and it takes winds based on the wave motion and their direction over the ocean. So you can only get this wind kind of estimation over the ocean. It's a really cool piece of technology from NOAA here, one of our satellites. And I was just looking at it. There is a broad field of winds about 30 to 40 knots. You need 35 knots for a tropical storm. And we have this closed off low-level circulation, albeit the convection's not terribly organized. It is a tropical storm at this time. So, yeah, and let's take a look actually at this is once again the official forecast from the National Hurricane Center right here, showing this intensifying slowly over the next few days. And I say slowly, maintaining 50, 60 miles per hour as we go ahead through Wednesday, Thursday, and into Friday. Now, it could hit an environment more favorable for tropical cyclone intensification by the end of the week heading into the weekend. And that's as it moves towards some warmer sea surface temperatures, which are currently located there just towards the north and east of Hispaniola, north of the Windward Islands as well. You can see that threshold out there, about 80 to 85 degrees. So right now it is in an area relatively conducive for tropical cyclone development, but it's definitely going to be more conducive further towards the west. It also will be moving away from an area of drier air. We're always talking about the Saharan dust, right? And you can see just on the northern periphery of it, it definitely has some dry air trying to wrap in. But I think this is going to fight it out. And as we look ahead through Friday, Saturday, and into Sunday, you can see here, especially, let's look ahead to Sunday and Monday. It starts based on all our spaghetti plots here, different models, showing that it kind of burst away from that dry air. And once it gets away from that dry air, enters an area of warmer sea surface temperatures, it's going to be hooked up into that environment that will allow for that further intensification of this storm system. Based on the official forecast, we're looking at a strong tropical storm to maybe a Category 1 hurricane, possibly near Bermuda. So for the East Coast, I'm not overtly concerned about this impacting, mainly because it is forming a little bit further towards the north here, and you're expecting to make that turn towards the north. Plus, you have a dip in the jet stream. So you can see this dip, albeit it is going to create some showers for parts of southeastern areas in the United States, including the first coast here. What will happen is that basically acts as a wall. So any system that wants to develop off here towards the west is going to hit this. And just think of like a tributary or getting into a river here. It's just going to hit that and get shoved off towards north and east. Boom, zoom right off. That's why we call it the jet stream, right? That should basically act as a wall, as our chief meteorologist, Lewis Turner, who just stepped out here to kind of update all this stuff, said just a few minutes ago. It's basically like a force field. It stops this and kind of kicks it off towards the north and east. So nothing I'm overtly concerned about here across the eastern half of the United States. For our friends in Bermuda, though, you can see just on the bottom part of this jet stream here is Bermuda, and that would, in theory, kind of mean that it would run right over that island out there, but staying well towards the east. One thing that we would want to watch out for is waves. All right, so even if it was a Cat 1 in 500-600 miles out towards the east, you still would be looking at some large swells coming off of this. So this is showing by next Tuesday. That would be, I said 500-600. It's more closer to 1,000 miles based on this particular guidance, Wave Watch 3. That is the U.S. Navy's model for forecasting wave heights. Based on this, that would be nearly 1,000 miles towards the east, but you would get those long swells, kind of the energy from the storm pushing out from it. And that always is worrisome because those swells can come on shore with a lot of force, and for people that may not be good swimmers, it can catch them off guard with that risk. But for surfers, long period swells without a lot of wind means good surf. You just have to know where to swim and stay away from those rip currents. So I think that's going to be one of the bigger issues with this based on the current forecast and the current track. So once again, we have Tropical Storm Gabrielle has been named by the National Hurricane Center as of the 11 a.m. update. Yeah, you can see right here the next storm on the list. Well, that one's going to be Humberto if we come to that. We are watching another area actually behind Gabrielle that could be coming off of the west coast of Africa. At this time, that is still given a low chance, 10% in the next 2 days, 20 in the next 7 days. So it's one of those where it's like we're watching it. Nothing screams development, but it's an area of convection in a region that could be conducive for tropical cyclone development. But at least at this time, this one now a tropical storm. Gabrielle, if you're just tuning in, winds of 45 miles per hour, pressure at 1,006 millibars, moving towards the north and west at 22 miles per hour. So actually at a fairly decent forward pace with this one. And pressure isn't that low. My point is it's not the most organized, but it is slowly going to get its act together, likely over the course of the next few days. I wouldn't expect rapid intensification with this one for the time being, but we're definitely going to keep a close eye on it over the upcoming days here at First Coast News. If you want more information, check out firstcoastnews.com/Hurricane Central. That's where we got all of our graphics at. We got some more analysis, and we're going to continue to post those updates for you here as well. So yeah, thanks for jumping in here. I'm meteorologist Robert Speta. Hey, if you have any questions, shoot me a message here at First Coast News. You can check me out on social media or at rspeta@tegna.com, or even Lewis Turner here as well if you'd rather talk to him. All right, as always, thanks for watching and stopping by, and I hope everyone stays safe out there as we continue to monitor Tropical Storm Gabrielle.